We appreciate everybody being here. I'm just going to kind of go over what our goals are. To create an open and transparent process, provide a clear path for nonprofits who provide services that Metro needs better than Metro can provide them, and to get into appropriate department budgets with clear objectives and accountability measures. That's been the one thing that's sort of come to light, that is that good-hearted council members have put things in the budget and then just figured everybody will figure out how to get the money to the nonprofits and how to make that process work. So we will plead guilty to in our good intentions creating some chaos sometimes, and we hope that this process will reduce that. And then finally, to work with the nonprofits and Metro's budget time frame to just make the funding work more appropriately. So that's our goal. And what we had talked about doing is improving some of the information that's available on the Metro website. And council members, we had homework to do, which was to look at the Metro Finance website as well as the charter and the code to see what's spelled out already that's available to the public. And it was the third thing to look at, hold on, which was, just looking at Section 5 of the code, as well as the Metro Grant Manual on the Finance website. So that is information that once you know where to look for it is out there. I think part of our charge is going to be to make sure that all the other council members are aware of that before this next budget season starts. So that's one of the things that we're going to be working on. So what our objective is then is to improve what's available out there for the public, and then ensure that the public sort of understands how this process can work better, and then also ensure that our fellow council members understand how this process can work better, so that we don't create the kind of confusion that we have in the past. So if we could pass around a sign-up sheet on the back of my Bus 101 thing, that'd be great, because I'm presuming this is mostly nonprofits that are represented here, and we appreciate y'all coming. So once we send that sheet around and I'll know who we have, then we welcome your input as we sort of begin to work through this process. So I'd love to have a quick discussion about the hub and what information that sort of provides to people who would like to work with Metro. And as council members, sort of what we've noticed looks good or doesn't look good, and then I would open that up to the visitors here who may or may not have tried to make use of that. So first of all, the council members in poking around, I'll start with three things I noticed. One is that it starts with what priority this is appropriate for nonprofits who align with our priorities, and in looking at that one last said, and what are Metro's priorities, where do we spell that out? It turns out farther down in the application process, there's sort of a drop-down list that was put together when we created this 3 years ago, and it still includes responses to the pandemic. So obviously that is something that needs to be updated on an annual basis. And part of what we're realizing is that we need to be sure we know who owns that process. It was created under a different administration. There was a specific person. I don't think that role still exists anymore. So, and is Mary Jo here? Mary Jo's here. So
Chair, just a side note on that. I just came from the UX UI committee that I serve on with a few people from the mayor's administration, NetTango. One thing that was listed as one of the biggest findings that through the analysis that our web service maintenance folks are looking at is that we have way too much outdated information on the website. There's going to be a huge push for that moving forward. Now, regarding departments, I think that there's going to be definitely some information going to come out just in regards to like what is out of date from the analysis that they provided.
Great. Okay, so that's helpful to know. But as you pointed out, it will need to sort of be owned by someone. And again, I mean, I would just ask finance if it makes, well, and on another committee that I've served on, which was to look at our tax abatement incentive process, we talked about having a more annual process of just talking about what are Metro's priorities. So I don't know if that, I mean, essentially that's often set by the mayor's office. And maybe we just run with that script for 4 years and that's it. But if there's any kind of official process for saying, we solved that issue, housing is no longer a problem. Wouldn't that be amazing? Now the biggest thing is grocery stores or whatever. So if we need to change those priorities on a regular basis, we need to sort of think about what that process would look like. But to me, it sort of makes sense. That group has sort of created a way for certain organizations to annually talk about it. Perhaps we can tie in with that, I would say. And then Mary Jo, I asked a question, then didn't give you a chance to respond. Just in terms of the finance department, or who would be a logical owner of that hub application page? And you're welcome to say not us, but if you if you have any thoughts on
I'm not going to claim it for Jane.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a grants and contracts division within finance.
Yeah. Should that be it? Jane, any thoughts on that?
I don't know that it should be, but it could be.
And if there's potential oversight or steering to the correct department, because that's still
Right.
the goal, to get them to the correct department that can.
It's really about
Love that.
establishing the connection to the department.
Right. Okay.
Again, if it's as simple as when inquiry comes in, that somebody makes sure that department knows that the inquiry is there.
Right.
We can lead the horse to the water.
Right. And I think that's a reasonable boundary right there.
Yeah.
So that's good. Okay. So I'm going to say Department of Grants is the convener, or at least the allocator. Shepherd that. Okay, that's great. Any other comments on the hub application? I think I have 2 more. And then also, not every department was listed. For example, the Office of Homelessness Services was not listed because I think it didn't exist 2 years ago when we created that. So again, just in terms of who owns what departments, make it to that drop-down list of what department are you applying to. It's sort of all the departments, but not really. So I don't know where that ownership should be, but.
And that's also a piece we had talked about, where just because the department's in there doesn't mean there's someone in that department that's there to receive it, that's ever going to know that it's there. So I don't know if that's part of what finance is willing to take on to make that connection, to make sure it's not just floating out there in space, but it's actually connecting to where it needs to go.
Yeah.
Or if that's another piece we need to look at.
And I guess the question is, should every department be there? Because there are a lot of departments where it's not necessarily applicable, but maybe somebody's got something creative that would be terrific, and we don't want to cut off that option. But, I think that's something that we need to try and emphasize. Meant to be included. Okay, anything else on the hub application? Great. All right, so I'm glad we're here. Include. Okay. And then, so any other comments? I don't want to cut anybody off. Comments from anyone who's visited, who has used that hub application, or other topics?
It's just to piggyback on the hub application. Is it not possible to have Metro ITS automated so that when people interact, it just goes to the department, to the designated point of contact for the department? That way you don't need that number of manpower from finance to support.
What we've discovered now, and maybe there are different ways to accomplish that, is that it specifies a person. I mean, it specifies a department, and some departments know that things are coming their way and know that. Others, for example, if we decided the Department of Emergency Management, who doesn't typically, as far as I know, I'm just pulling an example, they don't necessarily provide as many grants, for example, as the Health Department does, or Office of Family Safety. So what we are trying to be sure we've done is either tell every single department there needs to be somebody that checks once a week, or it probably is more feasible to have one person who checks once a week and says, oh, look, nothing came in, or, oh, look, this came in for that department. I'll ping the department head because I have no idea who our contact is. Regardless, we need to know that someone is going to see it, that it doesn't just sit there. And in some cases, I think that's what's happened in the past. And things change from year to year, and one person's in charge at a department, and then they move on. And if they haven't written their projects, procedures, and policies well, nobody realizes that was the person that did that and moves on. So I think having that, as well as having at least one person who's willing to look at it on a regular basis, that can either discover that person's disappeared and we need to find a new one or not, I think is it ideally it'd be great to have both on that. So somewhere I need a point of contact in each department, but I think we need to double back on that. Okay, so that's the hub application, and right now on the Metro Finance website, it has a page on the Community Partnership Fund Grants Program, as well as an program enhancement is what leads you to that. And that specifically drives you for the Community Partnership Fund. It says, if you've done this before, and we already know you, that's great. If you're new, start this application process, and then it sends you over to the hub. So I think that was one of the questions we were asking, is if somebody wants to work with Metro, is there a logical place to be looking? And now that I know to look for it, it seems very logical. But again, I'll ask our visitors here. If y'all, and again, we say that at the beginning of every meeting, we do not have the resources to give every great nonprofit the money that we would love to be able to give them. So our focus is where there are nonprofits that can do what Metro needs to be doing better than we can do it, then it makes sense for us to partner with those and we want to create that process. And many departments already have request for proposal processes out there that do that ongoing throughout the year. And we're not trying to go around to get rid of that process. Where it's already working, we're good. We just are aware that there are some organizations that are still learning how to at least see if they fit in that process, and there are other organizations that show up during the budget process, and council members with good intentions are creating chaos. And we definitely want to put a stop to that by ensuring that we're tying in it the right way, and that when we do, that we've created a process where there's a clear scope of work and there are clear measures of performance and accountability, and that everyone knows what's required. So that's what we're hoping we'll be improving on. So I'm just going to ask folks in the audience, because y'all are a great reality check here. Is the finance department notice about the Community Partnership Fund a logical place? Were y'all aware that's there? Is that where you always go to and start from? Or that's news to you? Or because as council members, I think we're still discovering what a learning curve we're on. And y'all may be on the same learning curve, or you may be light years ahead of us. So that's part of something we'd like to know.
Can we ask one question? Ask who's done work with Metro and who's new to doing work with Metro in the
All right,
room?
yeah, that's a good question. Who's already done work with Metro? Okay, so most of you, who hasn't? Any newbies here? So I thought so. Well,
I guess we're starting to.
through the Barnes Fund, you've
Well,
done.
get through Marshall,
Yeah.
that's exactly right.
That's true. So I don't think there's anybody here who's totally unfamiliar with Metro. And then just a general question, who thinks we've got this system down perfectly? All right, it's going to be optimistic there. Okay. Who sees room for improvement? Okay, you can be honest, all right, on that one. So, I mean, and part of what we said is, and I think Councilmember Huffman, since you're on that committee already, maybe if you can support us in trying to create as many different places as are needed just to drive people back to the one place where it's all gathered, which I think should be on the finance grants website. But if, for example, I just, I know I want to work with kids and I'm on the new mayor's office of youth safety thing, and I want to find out how I do this, if it's logical to just say, there's a process, here's where it starts, go back to there.
Yeah, even if it's a simple redirect.
Correct.
I think that's acceptable.
Correct. So I think I'm putting you in charge of that, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay, yes, I love telling you. Okay, so Council Huffman's going to work with the IT committee. Just to insert as many redirects as we need. And again, I think we always need to have the caveat or to be ensured that the impression we're creating is not, we've got money we need to give away, but we have needs and we know that there are nonprofits that can sometimes do this better than we can, and we want to work with them. We want to find y'all. Okay, so redirects. Great. Okay, anything else on the hub connection? So number one, if you can find it, that would be helpful. And number two, if we can ensure that when you put your information there that it actually goes somewhere, that's also important. Right now, there's nothing on that talks about timing. And again, if there's a department that already knows what they need and they're doing an RFP, that happens year-round. If you are trying to work your way into the Metro budget process, this is where we've found the biggest gaps. And as far as this committee goes, I think the biggest thing we've learned is that, number one, it's important to have relationships with the departments you're thinking about working with. And number two, those departments are trying to put their budgets together in preparation for having meetings with the mayor's office in the next January, February, and March coming up. And so if they have not talked about having entities or nonprofit partners in their budget at that point, it may not make it into the mayor's budget. And the next sort of insertion point is to work through the council when we have our budget process. And we're here to tell you that we have heard multiple stories now of organizations that we added to the budget at the last minute, and which is like last June 15th. And some of those are just now beginning to get their funding. So doing it that way begins a very long process of, oh yeah, you should have done an audit, or oh yeah, we really need to spell out your scope of work. So our hope is that we can, through this communication or this process, inform the nonprofits that are doing really important things in Nashville, that now's the time to get this process started. And when you do, if you'll just go ahead and look at the Community Partnership Fund information on the Metro Finance website, as well as Section 5.04 of the of Metro Code. I'm going to give you, I think it is .070, 5.04.070. That's where it says if you're this size, you need an official audit. If you're smaller than that, then you need a financial statement. And if you're even smaller than that, then you can prepare your own. So there's some guidelines there that talk about that. The grant manual is where it specifically says, and you need to have, a specific scope of work and accountability measures and what your timeline's going to be. We know most of these work as a reimbursement process, and we're not going to get into, what your cash flow is going to be like. Metro will reimburse nonprofits after they've shown us that work has been done in stages along the way. So I don't think that part of the process will change at all. But what we are trying to do is to provide everyone with enough information now so that if you can get into the mayor's budget, that is the best thing of all. And if you can do that by working with departments so that they have either created the request for proposals, which by definition, we're government and they have to be competitive proposals. So you may go to them and say, I can do this better than anybody, and they will say, great, here's my request for proposal. Other people are going to propose on this as well. That's just the nature of the beast. But if they're willing to do that, that will be part of their budget process. In some cases, they may be expecting to get grants from higher forms of government or something. Those don't actually show up in the budget until they've been awarded the grants, and then they can spend it. So that part is totally out of it doesn't even show up in our budget process. But if this is something where, for example, the Office of Homeless Services has relied heavily on Room in the Inn because they do a really good job of certain parts of that process. And so at this point now, their budget includes knowing that they are going to be paying Room in the Inn to do some stuff that is really important to us. And that now flows on the regular cycle. So that's where we're trying to get. So I think where we want to leave today is what documentation do we need for the general public and then also for our fellow council members, so that come January we're leading towards an orderly process rather than chaos in June or July.
Can we put a form online that, they have to name a council person, name a department they would like to work through?
So the hub form does specifically drive you to a department. I mean, you can't go to the next question until you've picked a department.
Does it state a council person on there?
It does not state a council person, and that's an interesting question. Because ultimately, again, if you can start in the orderly process and get into the mayor's budget, that's the easiest. If we go through our budget process, as you know, providing money for someone who is coming in later means taking it away from something else, which makes that a more interesting process. But we have reliably done that every year. We would like to do it where it's appropriate in a way that service can then begin to happen quickly, in August or September as opposed to.
That may be a good tool, not necessarily for our part of the budget process, but I'm still learning of nonprofits in my district. Mm-hmm. And so just as a tool to identify what work is being done, that might be helpful. That when they do that hub application, if a notification came to the council.
To ping a council member, okay.
Good point, yeah, very good point.
Not necessarily because they're gonna, automatically be in the budget, but just to understand who's doing what work.
Yeah. Is that a question or? Okay. Go ahead. Yes, Mr.
Would that council member be, for our organization, we are located in Councilmember Horton's district, but primarily our work is in Councilmember Gamble-Toombs and Kimbrough's district.
Point.
So in that scenario, and we do work in Councilmember Hancock's district as well, so would it be best where you're located, or would it be best where you're working?
I would say, I'm changing it to say add a ping to a specific council member or members.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
And I would say
that's
that
fair.
the more the better.
Yeah, we're all in a part-time functionality, so I think the more people that you CC, the better.
I mean, yeah. Please don't do all 40.
Yeah, please don't.
But if there are 3 or 4 that are all relevant, then I would do that to all of them.
Yeah.
And again, I'm putting that down with the question mark because number one, we got to figure out who's putting this together. So we'll work with IT, and I think Jane has been drafted to at least sort of look over the shoulder of this. And she's not shaking her head no violently, so that's good. Okay, so any other? I mean, I will say the Metro Code section of 5.04. All it talks about is the financial requirements that the nonprofit needs to have on the front end. just in terms of to show that you are a 501c3 indeed, and that you've got some kind of financial accountability. That's all it does, and that's probably okay. The rest of the information currently is on the finance community partnership website, and then deeper into the grant manual, which is where the very specific information is.
Yeah, just remember, community partnership funds are specific to 3 departments.
Yeah, and
That's
that,
not a generic,
right.
just a couple times that you've mentioned it, it sounded like you're using that as more of a generic term.
And that's an excellent point. I will say right now, it's not that clear on the website, so maybe we need to look at that language and see if we can make that more clear. And then, I guess the next piece of that is, there's the quote, Community Enhancement Fund, and I think maybe that's the name for,
That's a former name for community partnership funds.
that is still on the website. So,
I don't know that was under.
maybe we should all look at that and bleed on it. And again, I guess my question is, and Mary Jo, you do the best job, because I always throw in departments that are not the right ones. Will you say what those 3 departments are?
Social services, juvenile court, and Office of Family Safety.
Okay.
Thank you, Jane.
I think that needs to be on the homepage of that.
If, and other, yeah, so right now, so that was social services,
Juvenile court,
juvenile court,
and Office of Family Safety.
okay. Okay, family safety. So it may perhaps should be more clear under the Community Partnership Fund information, and maybe I just didn't read the rest of it because I got in a hurry. That's who those are for. And if we are saying, for example, that there may be organizations, and perhaps as we try to stand up this Office of Youth Safety, that we're not entirely sure what that looks like. So there may be some things that nonprofits can do better than we can. Is there an other category, or do we use that?
So those 3 departments have their own independent
And they'll get
application
that
process.
$1 million that gets split up or whatever?
Yeah, they each have 200,000.
And do they
So
now,
the hub application is really for everything else,
because right now,
not that.
right now, when you go to that website, there's a link that says Community Partnership and Service Enhancement Application that drove me to the hub application. Although it says if you've already done this process is moving to the hub. We're grateful for partnerships that have advanced Metro mission. We look forward to continuing these. Please follow the process below. And it drives you back to the hub. So right now, everything's going to the hub. And then so for organizations that have not worked with Metro before, and again, we very clearly state we are advancing the mission, expanding the reach, or enhancing and replacing services, and spell out what we want those to do. And then talk about the grant toolbox application. So that is where other people who think they can do something for other departments should be going, or?
For the hub?
Okay. All right, so I think there's good information here to send people to that. What we're gonna add is pinging a council member, trying to communicate to the public that this process really should start before January or early January at the latest. And if you've already got a relationship with that department, then there's a much better chance that they will understand what it is you're trying to do and how that aligns with them. And so, I got the examples from Metro Health. We had a good learning experience at the last one. About how we've done it wrong. We also talked about the fiscal agent. I think we kind of settled that piece, that if you're a small organization, this was one last thing we did want to talk about. If you're a small organization so that it is difficult for you to do an official audit,
Oh, yeah.
that there are processes either for partnering with other organizations so that between you can get those things covered. That's happened in the past, we've seen that. Or that umbrella organizations can be created that can do that. They will sometimes charge an administrative fee. Councilmember Webb, you had the question about, is there an appropriate place for us to specifically spell out that we're trying to limit that fee?
Right.
And I don't have enough experience in grant stuff, perhaps you do, to.
What was the question?
Do we want to put an official cap on that fee? What we heard at the last meeting was that had ended up being sometimes close to 20% or something that seemed.
Yeah.
For the grant writer?
For the, I guess it would be grant writer or the.
Grant administrator, whatever.
Administrative fee.
Yeah.
I mean, there usually is a cap, I think, in federal and state kind of funds.
Do you know what that is?
I think it varies depending on the program.
Gotcha. Okay, I don't know when you decide that, for that. Okay, so, timeline for us then, well, let me just stop and say, I appreciate everyone who's here, and if I haven't touched on subjects that y'all feel like we need to be thinking about, I would offer the opportunity to comment on what it sounds to you like we're trying to do, if this makes sense in light of what you've seen, or if there are other things we ought to be thinking about. Anyone? Are we heading down the right path here?
I'm with Habitat, but we're sort of a well-oiled machine and have been doing it for a while, so we know the in steps, process. But I think for a lot of nonprofits, that's just so vital it's just such a document-heavy process, and timelines are everything, and our building timelines are 2 years out, keeping the process and protocol streamlined and well communicated are just extraordinarily important. So I think you're right on top of it, and I appreciate the attitude of this committee that say to all of us, what do you really need? I mean, that's so important, so thank you for that.
Good.
We appreciate it, but I think having that and easy to find, sometimes I do feel like it's buried a little bit. And it's, again, we have 2 or 3 people in our grants department, so we're lucky enough to have the manpower to get there. But I think other nonprofits having the protocols easily defined and very easy to find, and then the timelines established would be, I think you're right on top of some of the things that are really most vital about the process.
Good, and what we've said in terms of timeline, thank you, Shirley, for that. Like I said, trying to start in January, apply on the hub by January. There is the March public budget comment period, which got added a couple of years ago, and I think seems to be becoming a permanent part of the budget process, rather than June. In the past had been the first opportunity for the public to weigh in on the budget, and that's way late. So I think March is kind of the time to come forth and say, we didn't make it in the mayor's budget. We think we should be in this. We know we're behind already. But, and maybe the council at that point needs to nab anybody who's speaking and say, great, if you're interested in this, do you have your financial house in order? Because, we can't have you coming to us in June, if you haven't gotten the audit and the other things like that, and maybe driving them to the stuff that's already there.
Do we have a helpline for grants people that are trying to?
I mean, the mayor's office that's a different direction, though. I mean, the mayor's office is creating a grant person, but I think that's applying for grants for metro departments, which is different. We'll segue into this in just a second. I mean, again, as Mary Jo continues to remind me faithfully,
We don't really do grants.
we don't want to create the impression that we have, lots and lots and lots of money to give away. We just want to ensure that there's an orderly process for the places where it's appropriate. So we don't necessarily have that. I mean, Jane is as much our person as anybody. Is that a fair thing to say? Yeah. So many things. And Jane, do you just want to comment on, weigh in on anything, or?
No, I think you all are having good discussion points. I think there is the process needs to be communicated better. I think there could be clarity. And the different names, it has changed per administration. And then, you have your direct appropriations, which are one thing. The CPFs, the community partnership funds are different. There's a limited amount of departments that have that budget, and then they have their specific process. But I can't emphasize key enough as those requirements per code that the nonprofits need to know about. Oftentimes, like Mary Jo has said in other examples, it's not communicated to them, and they're not aware. So we can't enter into a contract sometimes. So I think communication and making it awareness is key right now.
Got it. And some of that may be, and again, if we've added a council member communication or a ping, there are 5 of us in this room. And there are another 35 that have not spent as much time as we have thinking about this yet. So, our job is going to be to educate.
I do have a suggestion too, because
Great.
as you talk about the website and the usage of it, is that if the process or if it started out on the site from the front end, whether it's the promotion where you're talking about like starting it and then you're able to tap in. The problem with websites is that people go to them for as much information, and what Metro has not been good at is actually keeping it simple so that we are not coming to Mary Jo and Jane asking questions that should already be there. And so it's almost like a workbook, if you look at how the state and the federal government does, they have a PDF that has everything, the checklist, what you need to have, the FAQs, and so that way, if everything is put together, so that going back, that if you have to have had an audit or what you need to prepare, because the mayor's office might ask for something, and then the other groups might ask for something else. And so if it's all the same, which 9 times out of 10 it is, but the confusion is there. And so if it is a packet that's downloaded and people are able to reference it early, often, always, it makes it easier for the grantee, but also too on your side when you are trying to say yes or no or maybe.
And have you looked at the Metro Grant Management Manual?
Not most recently, because the 2 grants that we received from Urban League, one was from COVID funds for the past 2 years, and then the second was a grant that we received from Mayor, at that time, from Mayor Cooper, that directly came from his office, and then we worked directly with his staff that was internally within his office. So even the scope of work was drafted totally different, and then as his office changed over to Mayor O'Connor's office, dealing with a staff member, and then that staff moved from out of the mayor's office into the health department, and that was a whole nother bag of nuts of having to deal with, and it's also very painstaking.
You're our poster child, right? Sounds like it.
So, but yes, so that if the process could, be streamlined to packaging, and then when you talked about how some organizations did not get their funding, you had some folks last year or even this year who were supposed to be completed this June, and they did not have money until maybe February, March, April, so forth and so on. And then also too, how do we process back to you all when we have questions and concerns, because when we have issues, everybody is like babies standing around asking, like, I don't know what to tell you. And so it's kind of, you're kind of left in an abyss, like swimming. But yes.
And that's exactly what we've discovered, is that if it doesn't have a department that owns it from the get-go.
Right.
We are not the experts on the, why the contract hadn't started, but we had the folks from the health department at the last meeting who very helpfully said, here's why the contract didn't get written. And again, it's things that I think are spelled out in the grant manual. I'm seeing nodding yes.
Particularly if they're coming, if the funding was coming from the mayor's office, and then you're also in the midst of mayor's office changing.
Exactly.
And so you're kind of standing there, you know.
Yeah.
But the grant to manual does
It
always
does.
apply.
It does always apply.
It doesn't matter if it was ARP funds, it doesn't matter if it was initiated by a department or the mayor's office. The grants manual applies 100% of the time.
And I think that's what we've seen. For those who don't know, I'm fairly new to my role, almost a year, but the consistency. It's inconsistent from place to place where the awareness comes into play on what is the process, what it should look like. And if someone didn't do it a certain way, maybe they weren't aware of the requirements. That doesn't mean we just don't follow the requirements. We need to implement those and
Gotcha.
start correctly.
And so I think you also stated that the mayor's office is in the midst of bringing in another grants person. So then that person needs to be in line with this.
Well, and
committee.
I correct myself, because that grants person is going to be applying for grants for Metro.
Okay.
That's a different animal. So there's really not, I mean, other than Jane. And what is your official title, Jane?
I'm the Grants and Accountability Division Director.
Division Director. Okay.
Within Finance.
So, within finance. And it may be, if nothing else, you can be a resource for departments. If we are saying to departments, we think, health, for example, I mean, I don't know, they've done this a lot, but just again, to ensure that the departments that maybe don't do this a lot are aware that the grants manual is out there, and that's the playbook on how you do it. And also that the council members know that, to say to every nonprofit, here's your starting point. And hopefully we can communicate that better. That's part of what we're trying to learn for that process. So I think we had asked maybe if Jane and Mary Jo would work on a one-pager, which I feel like the Community Partnership Grants Fund page is, and maybe we just stick with whatever the name is this year. But if there can be an official place on this that for the other, whatever we're going to call it, without making it sound like it's a bottomless fund. To say, here, because I mean, for me, even looking at it, it's not completely clear that one of these is 3 departments and it's that specific $1 million bucket of money, and they've got their own RFP process. So maybe if we can make that a little more clear on that.
I think we'll be moving in an interim step, and I mean, because I get so many questions, 100% this isn't set up the way you would set anything up. But I just want to remind folks, it's because we are not a foundation to apply to grants for. That was never the intention.
Yeah.
So we've never created anything. I mean, if we were creating a grant application process, it wouldn't look like this.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say, this isn't user-friendly, but that's because there wasn't supposed to be a use. So
Right.
we certainly can make some clarifications and improvements, what I would call on an interim basis. I think the most important thing that we've probably discovered as part of this subcommittee is that there will be a true grant fund available. I don't know if it's going to be FY27 or if it's going to be FY28. But so we have this FY26 budget coming, in the next couple of months that we could provide some clarity for. But without, the struggle has been, we can have some clarity, but the bottom line is there's still not a grant pool of funds. There just isn't. So if a nonprofit wants to apply for funding from Metro, the council members are going to have to pull funding from something else. We don't have a grant pool. We do have $600,000. That's the Community Safety Partnership Fund. That has been in the budget. I don't know that that's in the budget this year, but that is historically what's been in the budget. So the 1 million is really 600,000, because it used to be 5 departments, it's 3.
Okay. Oh, shoot.
Just to clarify a few of your comments.
I was hoping we kept the pie the same size.
No, just to clarify a few of your comments. So
Okay.
those departments run an independent process based on their needs. They have a grant application process based on their needs, and that's what we're saying works. If other departments had needs, we want the nonprofits to partner with those departments, and the departments can make the budget modification request.
Right.
That is really the current process. And then there's all sorts of flaws in it, but it's that way for a reason, because there aren't a pool of funds
Right.
to apply for.
Right.
That's why we don't have something that looks like a typical foundation's grant application process. It's why we don't have a grant cycle of timing, and here's the forms, and here's the page, and all of that. There's still things we could do to make it easier this year, but at the end of the day, it still has to be that department that is going to make that request, and the nonprofit has to be partnering with that department ahead of time. All that will change in the
Right.
very near future.
Yeah, and so, just to explain, we will be creating or as part of the stadium deal, the Nashville Needs Fund will be created, and that will be $1 million a year, plus whatever comes in from what got added as part of ticket tax, something or other, so $1 million plus. And that the council is responsible for divvying up. That is not there yet. We are not entirely sure what that allocation and evaluation process will look like, but I believe part of our goal is to, as we're trying to improve our budget process, to lay the groundwork, if not, go ahead and figure out what that process looks like. And so I would say, I feel like we have done a good job of getting our arms around what the process is. Our next step is to educate the rest of the council. And I would welcome suggestions on the best way for us to do that in the time we have remaining. I'm gonna try to have us be finished at 2:30. And then maybe just to think a little bit about how this could lead into the Nashville Needs Fund, and if we want to spend our next meeting trying to think through what that looks like. And again,
Would this be an item for the executive committee to disseminate down through committees?
Yeah.
We talked about doing an educational type session too.
Yeah,
I think both would be very beneficial.
that's a great idea. That's a great idea. All right, let's plan on that. So this is council education process. Okay, so executive committee and a special meeting, which I think should happen in early January at the latest.
I'd agree.
I agree.
100%. Yeah, I mean, we're running right into budget season.
Yeah.
As soon as the holidays
Right,
are over.
right. January.
7th is open. Y'all don't have a meeting.
January 7th, for example? Yeah. Seventh, maybe? Not doing anything else? Okay. Question mark? When's the next executive committee meeting?
That's what I was just looking for. I think it's not till January,
Okay.
but that's plenty of time to,
Okay.
I don't even know if it's been set yet. I'll set
Okay,
it.
again, Councilmember Huffman, can I put you in
Yeah,
charge
yeah,
of CM
yeah.
Huffman will get us on the agenda?
Yep.
The
Okay.
7th?
He's going to put us on the executive committee meeting agenda and let us know when that is. We don't know at this point when it is. And then I'll work with the vice mayor to get a council special committee meeting set up for the education for them. To set that up. And then, again, thank y'all for being here. In terms of communicating with those that need to hear it, has this type of forum been useful, and have we done that piece of it? We would continue to welcome feedback on, I mean, as you look at what's out there now, if you want to, just continue to say, these drop downs don't make sense, or these priorities seem like they're from 2 years ago, where's whatever, that's all welcome. You want to direct those to me and copy Danielle, that would be good. Who sends out the notices on that? Any other thoughts or comments on this part of it in general? So I think what we've said is, again, maybe if everyone will specifically look at what's on the website now and kind of redline it, and can we shoot that to Mary Jo and Jane and just with suggestions do on that part. And then let's plan maybe on those meetings and maybe one more meeting of us to talk about the National Needs Fund specifically and what the trajectory should be to ensure that this process is heading us towards doing that one right. And we might want to invite maybe the 3 council members that served on the CARES Act committee. Would that be just in terms of having other folks talk us through what a good evaluation process looks like, or do we want to do it that way? Thoughts?
I would say it was a very different evaluation. I don't know that it was a little bit of apples and oranges as
Okay.
far as a more traditional evaluation.
Who would be?
So, I mean,
who would be a
they're
good?
certainly familiar with nonprofits, coming forth, and those 3 council members brought forth to the committee a lot of the requests. So I still think they have a lot of kind of good knowledge and background, but as far as process, I wouldn't equate it.
Okay.
I think it's a very different process.
Is there a better go-by that we should invite to educate us, do you think?
I think the 3 departments that run
That?
the application process for CPF
Okay.
are probably well-versed in what kind of criteria they use, how they put out notices, what rubric they use for evaluating.
Okay. All right, I'll get with you to figure out who from there. CARES committee. So we'll invite those 3 council members from the CARES committee, and then representatives from those 3 departments, community partner departments. Okay? All right. One last chance to the people that are on the receiving end of this. Anything else y'all want us to hear or do, or?
We are very thankful for your time. I can say personally, I've been on the other side of this, applying for money with Metro, with, at the time, Budget Chair Allen, and even though she made it easy, it was still, made me want to pull my hair out, and that's a hard task to do.
Looks like you got it done.
I got it done, yeah, that's what happened, yeah.
Yeah, and again, that probably could be improved on as well. Great, so I think this group should meet one more time in January. We could nab the 7th, or do you want to stick with the?
I was just teasing, y'all pick whatever day.
Let's see.
I'm out on the 7th.
You're out.
Hold on. Today we're meeting on a Monday. We had been meeting on a Wednesday. Clearly, I don't know when.
No. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Okay. Oh, I'm not online. That's why I can't get mine to come up. Never mind. So possibly.
Council day, right?
No, it's not.
No, we get a 5-week break.
Oh, that's right.
Council until 21st.
That's crazy.
I forgot all about that.
That's what I was
So if you were
teasing
going to be
about.
here anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, no, get off and take it. All right, what is
Y'all are
the,
friends.
what does the group say?
I'm gonna have a hard time,
Next week, the week after that?
the week after that is just better. Right?
Okay, let's look at the week after that.
Okay.
That begins with the 12th, with the 13th,
13th, yeah.
the 14th.
14th or 15th.
Okay, 14th,
Good.
does that work?
That's fine.
council members?
Yes.
Same time, 1 o'clock.
Yes, I'm gonna put that in.
14th.
Nashville time.
That one.
I'm so sorry.
Happens to best of us.
Yeah.
I'm just glad it happened to somebody else.
Okay, that's Monday, the
No, it's Tuesday the 14th.
Tuesday, 14th.
14th, okay, I landed on the wrong day too, okay. Great,
1 o'clock, what we're saying.
profit, okay, 1 o'clock, that sounds good. Okay, so what are our marching orders? I think maybe just to, if we can, we'll invite those people to come, we'll look at the, and then we need to, I think, I would invite people to put together your thoughts on what we want to say at those other two council meetings.
Yeah,
Whether, I mean, you know, because it's boring to have one person say something, so
yeah.
maybe one person gives the background and once it will, I'll sit down some.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, so we're going to set up a meeting with the executive committee. We'll talk about setting up a separate meeting. I'll work on the timing for that one. And then I may just assign each one to give the background and one to give the where we think we're going kind of part of that to the,
That's fine.
something like that. Okay, so that's Tuesday, the 14th at 1. We got it. Any other thoughts or questions? I do have parking passes. Does anybody need one of those?
I handed them out at the
You
beginning.
did, okay.
Yep.
All right, you did that. That's great.
Sharon needs one.
Oh, somebody need
Can we get,
I know you know them, but we don't, I
Wanna
don't know
quick-
them.
yeah.
Can we just quick know what
Sure, those who are
where they're
left.
from?
Yeah,
Like
y'all
she
wanna-
said, Habitat.
that was Anton, yeah.
And this was Anton Jackson, he was with Rebuilding Together Nashville. I'm Sherry Stinson, I'm with Habitat for Humanity of Greater Nashville.
I'm Elizabeth Millsaps, Millsaps Public Strategy. I do lobbying, and I serve on the board of the YWCA.
Gotcha.
Michelle with the YWCA, Michelle Mallory Johnson.
Benita Davis, Metro Action Commission.
Frank Bouye, Urban League of Middle Tennessee.
Sharon Roberson, YWCA.
And
IRO Metro Action.
Metro Action, okay, great. We appreciate y'all being here. We learn something every time we get together with this group, so we're hoping we can make this so that it serves people better. So if there are no other thoughts or comments, we're adjourned.